Welcome to the Neurogenic Integration Podcast, where we explore the incredible potential of neurogenic tremoring beyond the basics. I'm Alex Green.
And I am Sylvia Song-Shields. Together, we'll be diving into how this natural, innate process can be seen and applied across different professions, healing modalities, and in scientific research.
Whether you're a practitioner, a coach, a therapist, a body worker, or a researcher, this podcast is for you.
Join us as we uncover the science, share experiences, and explore how neurogenic integration is revolutionizing the way we approach stress, trauma, and well-being.
So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm excited to be sitting down this afternoon with Tanya Beard. And Tanya is a TRE provider and also a nurse practitioner and some other things she'll tell us about. But most centrally to today's conversation, she is the current and somewhat new executive director of TRE for All, which is the global NGO or nonprofit organization that administers TRE certification trainings. And those of you listeners to the podcast, Neurogenic Integration, we talk a lot about tremoring and TRE. And so TFA or TRE for All is the home of much of the activity that we see all around the world. So I feel very honored to have Tanya on the show today. And what I'd really like to hear from Tanya is a lot about kind of her own personal story. Everybody has gotten drawn into neurogenic tremoring and TRE kind of usually for our own personal reasons. And so I'm gonna want to know that sort of story from Tanya, but then also just kind of how in her role, central role within the TRE for All organization, what kind of work is happening now, and what sorts of opportunities are coming as we collectively, tremors around the world, as we sort of shape this modality and how it works in today's world. So that's kind of what I'm hoping that we cover today. Tanya, thank you so much for taking time to sit down for a conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. It's been fun to get to know you a little bit too, coming into this community and meeting so many wonderful people a little more deeply into the community.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, I guess if we start with my story, like you said, I was a nurse practitioner. I retired from that career. I guess if I go back before that, I was a nurse, bedside nursing. So a lot of very intense situations, mostly in pediatrics. So families,
Okay.
a lot of crisis, a lot of, when children are hurting, it really brings out the best of us. And I think, I've worked in adult medicine and I've worked in pediatric medicine. There are differences. A lot of people would wonder, how do you do pediatrics? And I thought often that pediatrics is so much more all encompassing. You're really in the moment, really trying to focus on the child, make sure that they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like everything else in the room goes away.
Okay.
And so, starting there, and my first job was in pediatric oncology and bone marrow transplant.
Wow.
And I was young. I was 20.
Is this because now you're in Oregon, is that correct?
In Washington now, yeah.
Washington now, okay.
That was in Oregon. So I got the one spot in my senior year. There was a clinical spot at Dornbecker Children's Hospital for pediatric oncology and bone marrow transplant.
Wow.
And I would say I did everything but beg, but I think I did beg for that spot. I would see my teacher on campus and I'd walk by her and cough and be like, oh,
Me. Yeah.
Peds oncology. And she was like, you're so annoying. You're so annoying. But I did get it. And then I was lucky enough to be employed there. And so I was 22, working with children with cancer, children of all ages. The youngest was 3 months. The oldest was obviously in their 20s. And then did some work with adults from there and kind of traveled around in nursing. And then I was a child and family psychiatric nurse practitioner for about 10 years.
Okay.
And all encompassing probably around 22, 25 years.
Yep.
Did some work as a consultant, and then moved to Washington. And my nurse practitioner journey ended because we moved the year before COVID.
Okay.
And so I had, when your licenses are state dependent, and there are some licenses that have like a multi-state pact, and I didn't have one of those.
Okay.
I'm looking at, moving to a new state, getting the children. I have two kids.
Right.
And they were, middle school and early elementary school age. And I was like, nope, this isn't going to happen. And Alex, I just let it go. I let the licenses go. I let my RN license go. I let my nurse practitioner license go. And I just kind of hunkered around the family, so to speak. And I was a mom. I was just being a mom for a long time, which oddly is the hardest job I've ever had.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah.
So we did that, got through the pandemic. And, somewhere along that journey, I was realizing, I don't want to say the limitations of psychiatric medication, because I think that they are extremely helpful when they are. And I think it's a wonderful tool. I think, sometimes I hear psychiatric providers say that, that medication is the limitation. I think that maybe for me, it wasn't that I saw medication as limited, it's that it wasn't the fun, it wasn't the most engaging and fun tool for me. I was good at it. It's a pretty straightforward, methodical, evidence-based
You were a prescribed, like you prescribed.
Yeah. Did counseling, did some, basic mindfulness, and just like the regular suite of, complementary, accessory, adjacent, how does it feel to just sit in silence and breathe for 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, you can't do that. All right. That kind of helps you gauge where you're at. 2 minutes of silence can really help people gauge where they're at early in their adventures with stress.
Yeah.
So, I started thinking about yoga and bringing yoga to kids, and I found a lot of people who were doing that. And you start adding tools to your kit, and that was really fun because I liked the movement piece. I always would take my teenage clients out of the office. So they'd come in for their psychiatric med management, they'd come in for their counseling, we'd go for a walk.
Oh, cool.
Because bilateral, right? I was such a body person from the start.
Yeah.
So we would walk, and then I found out that was, like an evidence-based
practice.
Practice. Yeah, exactly. So just kind of intuitively following my body of work was into movement, yoga with kids, making it fun for them. And then I would have parents come in that wanted to do yoga with the kids, and I was terrified I was going to hurt a parent because kids are bendy and
kids are limber.
Yeah. And I'm looking at adults and I was sweating, and I was like, no, I can't do this. So then I learned to teach adults yoga, in this very accessible, basic entry-level way, and just to try to make space for families to move together. And so it was one of those trainings that my mentor had us, at the end of the day, she gave us an optional, it's just optional since you're here staying on the site, if you want to try TRE. And I did. And I thought, why not? I literally thought, like, why not? I'm staying here. I may as well. And I had never heard of it. I had no idea what it was. And so I did the TRE exercises.
Right.
And I just remember, like, I like visceral memory. It's a visceral memory of laying on the floor and looking up at the ceiling and just thinking this, like, what is this feeling of, it was like a feeling of, I've written this in before, people have probably read it if they, ever read anything I've written, but effervescence, a little bit of effervescence. And it was a feeling of delight. And I thought, what the heck? And there's just curiosity, right? This so brimming with curiosity. And then I immediately was like, who came up with this? Like, and so I started researching who had come up with it. And I'm very much, my spouse has always called me an omnivore. I'm voracious. If I've learned about something, I want to know more about it. I think we have that in common. And so I learned about David, learned about his story. And I thought, well, if my experience is, in all these stories I just told you, those little micro run through my experience as a nurse, there's so much pain, right? And so much nausea and so much suffering and stress and tension. And I thought, okay, so if the common factor is that after things happen, right, there's the time for recovery and rest and reset.
Yeah.
And that part was always really, really appealing to me. So, and how do we, how do we coexist while we're in this, and as somebody who's incredibly empathetic, also just that, I think, sincere desire to, you're giving pain medications as a nurse. You're literally giving pain medications sometimes when people are in pain. And sometimes, there are moments I was in, Alex, where no matter what medication, we've maxed out what we can give.
Yeah. And
Right.
it doesn't,
Maxed out.
not doing it.
Yeah, there's nothing else you can do. And you're sitting, and then it's just you sitting with somebody very young,
Suffering.
yeah, who's in intense pain. And so I thought, okay, interesting, right? So these are all experiences. You kind of go out on this branch and then you come back to the trunk, and you go out on this branch and you come back to the trunk. And TRE is so accessible, and it's so simple, and it doesn't require, a specialty medication visit. And it's something you can do when you're with people. It's something you can do when you're alone. You can do it in the moment. I've once you do the TRE, right, for me at least,
Yeah.
once I did the TRE and had access to the tremor mechanism again, right? We like to call it the tremor mechanism, but just to my own innate ability to shake it off in the moment, it's kind of was
there. It
yeah.
becomes part of you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
just interjecting briefly, like, this, you're talking about the environments that nurses are in. It's bringing me back, before the pandemic, before I moved to Colorado, and I was based in Madison, Wisconsin. And I was doing a mix of TRE and structural integration body work. And for about 5 years, it wasn't like all my clients were nurses, but like that was the category of person that I had the most. I was like, I just like want to support. It's like I went through this period where I learned how much how some way. I mean, of course, doctors, everybody's got their own version of this, but I just learned to how much nurses are exposed to in terms of secondary stress, trauma, the kind, and especially, I mean, hearing about, pediatric oncology, that's
Yeah.
heavy duty stuff. And when I found TRE for a while, I was on this mission where I was doing a lot of work with nurses in the UW health system, where
Oh, yeah.
like where, this was through invitation, but and it was the nursing staff and related that were really valuing TRE. And, maybe they ultimately, some of them became providers and used it in patient care, but just for the nurses themselves as a tool. And I'm remembering all this as I hear what you're
Yeah.
sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I think nurses are, like you said, like, there's so many players in the field of the care and keeping of the humans, right?
Right.
And all are, it's like you said, all are relevant, all are important, all are, vicariously taking on the stress and the trauma and
Yeah.
and the machinations of the system, the healthcare system, and all of that. It's just very intense, right? And so, but I got such an insight into nursing when I was a patient for the first time.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I had been a nurse at such a young age. I hadn't had children yet. I didn't have my children until I was in my 30s. And so,
Sure.
and I'm taking care of little babies. And so in a lot of ways, that helped a lot because, you know, it's very procedural. It's very invasive. I mean, I always would tell people you're up to your elbows sometimes in someone's suffering, right? And you're really in intimate space with people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And while trying to respect dignity and boundaries, all of this is such a fine balance of so many things. And then I had the unfortunate experience of being kicked I think, have I told you the story about how I got kicked in the face by a horse?
You've alluded to it. Never where we had enough time for me to really understand this. So
Okay.
yeah. Let's hear the
Okay. Well,
story.
I like challenging things, which we'll get to the executive director role later. I like challenging things.
Yeah.
I uh I like backpacking. I like skiing fast, and I like doing all these grueling things. And I had a bad habit when I was young of picking horses that I had no business, really
Riding.
working with. But it was just a thing I did. I really enjoyed it. And for a lot of years worked with a lot of horses that were, I don't know, maybe they were just challenged, they had challenges, various challenges. And this horse and I got along really well. But one day it just a kind of a myriad of things happened that just resulted in her pushing into my space, and I pushed her back. I'm like, hey. And she just shot forward and kicked me right in the face, right on the chin. And so there's like normally healthcare providers, I know so many ER doctors that would rather just like, take care of something themselves at home than ever go into the ER. And I think a lot of nurses are that way too. You can't self-care a broken jaw.
No.
You just cannot.
No.
And so I ended up going in, and then had to ultimately go back in and get the jaw wired shut and all of that. And so it's time to leave and go home. And I was panicking because my jaw was wired shut. And I woke up from the anesthesia in a not great, it was the panic, right? And I'd never had that experience before. So I was like, wow, this is different. Usually I wake up from anesthesia giggling and cackling and telling jokes. And that's much more what I'm used to, but I was panicked. And so I ended up staying the night rather than going home because they had to put me back out a couple times. And so I I'm sitting there, and every single person that came in my room was like, first of all, it was very difficult for me to start walking, be like, oh, the IV pole, I have to take that with me, right? How many times have I walked the IV pole? I just tried to walk away without the IV pole. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is very odd. And whenever somebody came in to do anything at all, start an IV, anything at all, the nurse would say, ooh, did I hurt you? And I thought, oh, we have this job where we literally hurt people all day long while providing care, right? Not all of the time, but often, right? We're doing these things that harm. And so it was so interesting to see everybody so like flinchy that they might have hurt me. And I thought, you're fine, like you're taking care of me. And I realized the impact of that alone, right? Just seeing that like hesitance to hurt people while taking care of them. And I thought, wow, what a weird juxtaposition, so that gave me a big insight. So I think that the caretakers, the nurturers, the procedure, even I've known some people who aren't very nurturing or caretaking in their nature, but they're really good at the procedural part, or they're really into the anatomy or whatnot, and they're wonderful clinicians. And I think that toll of being the person who's inflicting discomfort onto people, even just that alone. I just saw it in their bodies. Because like I said, it was, what do we talk about in TRE and a lot of body-based methods is the tension, like the shoulders coming up and the tension. So that was interesting. And that, I don't know, it changed my perspective a little bit. It was interesting. The first time you're a patient. Yeah.
Well, okay. So you mentioned that, your first TRE exposure, you had no idea what it was. So I'm guessing, was that with Lynea and Jim?
Yeah, it was Lynea. It was at a yoga comm for children, one of the trainings. And I had stumbled into that because I was trying to figure out how to help people just breathe, because we can do medication and we can do counseling, but a lot of people that I was sitting with just couldn't breathe. And so I was like, well, what if we start to figure out how to combine these things and bring in the body? But yeah, it was Lynea. Cool. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Well, so once you had, your first experience and it was so interesting for you, and then you looked, what the heck is this thing? What's sort of is it like you started doing it for yourself? How soon between that and deciding you wanted to train in it? Like, what was that timeline like?
Well, anytime that I experience something that this is going to sound really funny, but that just feels like it lightens the human experience, right? As somebody who navigated my way to the level of being a nurse practitioner, right? That advanced care, I want to be able to share it, right? I think that all of us, if we can in community, try to lighten each other's loads as much as possible together collectively, just sharing any tools. And so I just wanted to share it immediately. So like I said, I have a habit of anytime that I find something new. I want to research the roots of it. I want to see, what's it adjacent to, what informed it, where did it come from? I want to see the lineage of it, right? And so you could see where David's very natural, Dr. Berceli's very natural curiosity, right? Of just observations in real time and getting curious about something, and then, looking at how that all influenced it. Just, I was captivated by how he saw something, he got curious about it, and he created something so simple. And I thought, what a wonderful thing. So I felt like his story was good, and I got to know him a little bit through, you know, reading about him, right? Watching some of his videos, and that was enough for me to feel like, okay, I want to learn this. And then I found my way. My trainer was Susan Shifman.
Mm.
So Susan trained me, and that was a wonderful experience. She was so, Susan's gone now, of course. She had this light in her eyes. She was very interesting woman. So I learned her very gentle and I want to say like just a very simple version of TRE, gentle and simple, nothing, nothing added on, nothing exciting. But what she said too was that, what you know this in your practice, right? Combining methods or sequencing methods with TRE, right? It complements other things so well. And so Susan would say, we try in the TRE world to, this is TRE, this is not TRE. If we're blending models or we're doing a, like a workshop, just being really clear. But she always was really clear with me that the mixing is where the fun begins, right? Because you can have some fun with TRE. So I liked that because, I'd been already working with yoga with children and adults, mindfulness, Vipassana, all the different things, medication, all the things you do when you're trying to prescribe medication, like diet and lifestyle and all that. It just was such a good compliment. So it just fit right into the
right into what you were
toolkit that I already had. Yeah. And the more people I met, the more, TRE has attracted such an interesting community of people. I think really, really curious people, really, people who, much like myself, right? Like, how do we do this together? How do we all do this together? So yeah, it just fit. It fit at the time. It was great. And it's given me.
So then was that after you moved to Washington and you had stopped being a nurse, or was this still when you were nursing?
Still when I was a nurse, I was a nurse practitioner.
I see.
And so then I had this interesting shift from strictly psychiatry into like population health nursing, right?
Okay.
And we've talked to all along the way that I had been in college when I was in nursing school. I was in ROTC.
Yep.
We talked about that, and
weren't you like National Guard or something like that?
I was in the National Guard at first. Actually, it's a very weird story. I had a pilot slot. As a nurse. And I was thinking about being a pilot. And then I was thinking about, can I be a pilot and a nurse? And people are like, well, you could, but oh. And I was like, I could. If anyone could, it would be me. I would do it. And I'm like, no, can't do it. I can't do that. So I gave the pilot slot because I wanted to stay at Dornbecker. And I love taking care of children with cancer. It was such a wonderful time for me. So gave that up. At the very last minute, they opened up some Air National Guard slots. So I had given the pilot slot back, and I waited till the last minute so I couldn't get a nursing slot back. So I got the Air National Guard spot as a nurse. Did just like mission readiness, right? Keeping people ready to go to deploy wherever they would need to in the state. And then I shifted to the reserves, the Air Force Reserves. I was in Colorado, I was in Alaska, kind of all around, women's health, pediatrics, just a few different things. But I loved that. And so then I was looking at like some of the experiences I had in the military, right? Where people have profound trauma from deployments or, what people I think don't think about often is that I want to say that we elevate and therefore sometimes dehumanize veterans and military service people, right? We think of them as these characters, and they're just people like us too, right? They are people. I was a people too. And all of the military members that I worked with and were friends with, right? A lot of us had our own issues separate from things that we accumulated through the military work that we did, right? Whether we were overseas or deployed or active duty or not. It's a system. And so it lended really well to that too, right? To my military friends, the athletes, right? I mean, the military is so physical. You're doing so much weightlifting and clinics and
physical
training all the
training.
time.
Yeah.
So it just touches on so many things. So that was lovely. So I started doing consultant work.
Mm,
So consultant work around like, okay, so yeah, I feel like because primary care has gotten so bogged down
mhm,
and there's a lot of healthcare provider shortage areas that the things that used to happen, just teaching like basic self-care, basic preventative care, basic lifestyle care has become inaccessible because there's not necessarily time for it in the sessions anymore with your healthcare team,
right. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you kind of can't bill for it, right? The
Right.
model shifted
It's
so
not, yeah,
significantly.
very
Now,
much
in
so.
some places you can, and in some ways that you can, but we're trying to hold on to like an archaic model, right? I was in medicine when the care shifted from preventative to tertiary.
Mm,
And so I thought, okay, that has fallen off. Um, I'm sitting here doing specialty medicine to try to get people to look at the basics and then add the specialty medicine in. So I just started focusing on the basics with
mhm,
people,
okay.
and then adding in things like TRE and different ways of communicating as families. And so I was working with schools. I tried to go to the places where things were happening that were leading to kids coming into my office, right? Families, schools, treatment centers, et cetera. And so I started doing a lot of consultant work and I loved that work, helping teachers understand how
Mhm,
to take a step back, cover the heart, engage from a cortex place, right? Because teachers are overwhelmed too. And so really looking at all the industries that were kind of where kids go that are just beleaguered and burdened and exhausted and trying to help, on that level as well. Yeah. And then we moved. So in Washington, um, what happened between leaving Oregon and leaving that consultant practice and that population health level and working in schools, coming to Washington, pandemic happened, right? And I'm working with my kids and learning about alternative education models during COVID and all of that, just like everybody was.
yeah.
Right? Trying to scramble and figure it out, trying to find our little COVID pods and bubbles and stay safe. And how do we figure this out? And what are we going to do? And then, I didn't want to go back to medicine, not because I didn't love medicine. I loved the practice of medicine. But, once you step away from that model and you take a significant time away from that model, going back in, first of all, there are a lot of barriers to reentry, a lot of barriers to reentry, unfortunately. And so I thought, how bad do I want it? And I got a job at the library, Alex. I just went and got a job at the library. And so I
Mhm,
was working at the local library, the public library, and I loved it.
yeah.
I was on the community engagement team, doing like, baby story times, family story times,
We
like the
we
little,
are, as a family, I have 2 young kids, as a family who heavily leans into our local library for story
yes,
time and all of the above.
yes,
I appreciate the people like you
yeah.
who put on those programs. Yeah.
It's so fun and so many different community events. And just, the thing too is that libraries have become not just the place for books and research, but like the kind of like a town, like a public
Very much.
square.
It's yeah,
Yeah.
definitely so.
So
Yeah.
all my skill set kind of lent into that. And so I'm sitting there with all these, this whole story I've been telling, this eclectic set of skills and leading into Lynea called me and said, Tanya,
Yeah, well, so when was that? So locate us in time. So you got the
yeah,
somebody tapped on your shoulder in the form
yeah.
of a phone call. What
Yeah,
te
yeah.
what
So that was a year, it would be about a year and a half ago. I think it was like
that
September, October.
short? Feels like it was like 2 decades ago,
It
no?
feels like it feels like I'm 100 years old now. I feel like you and I have just met, but this is like when you meet under
We
intense.
go way back, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've known you 4 weeks. Yeah, it's been about a year and a half. And
Okay.
so that was, I mean, Lynea, I had started helping Lynea with her trainings.
Mhm, and just so everybody knows, Lynea Gillen is a TRE certification trainer, and also she runs the yoga. She and her husband Jim, Yoga Calm, based out of Portland, right? They're in Portland.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You've come
Yeah.
for
Just so we
children.
know
It's
who we're talking about here.
wonderful.
Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Lynea is a visionary, and I think much like Dr. Berceli, we meet people and they just have these great ideas and they kind of pave a way, using something like as brilliant as yoga in the rural, Oregon setting in schools at the time that she did was unheard of, and just
Yeah.
bringing it in for kids.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So I love these people that are courageous and curious and, how do we do this a little bit differently? And, and then here we are, right? So Lynea and I have always gotten along. My interest in pediatrics, I've really learned a lot from her over the years. And Jim is just hilarious and such a, I want to say like sophisticated, intentional person with how he teaches yoga to avoid injury and to increase the accessibility, right? The entry, the sort of, one of the things I'll never forget, I always hear in my mind is like, raise the floor up, right? So how do you raise the floor up? Like add blocks or things so that when you're trying to touch the floor, you raise the floor, right? And that fit in with the model. Another person that I've always looked up to is Maria Montessori, the Montessori school model. I taught in a toddler classroom, a Montessori toddler classroom. So just that, make the work smaller. If it's too big, make it smaller, right? And increase accessibility and entry points. And I think that is my mindset overall, is decrease barriers, increase entry points, right? So Lynea has known all this about me, and I was thinking about being a trainer. I was thinking about being a trainer. And so I asked Lynea, I said, would it be possible to kind of tag along a little bit and just sort of learn, reiterative learning. I love like just listening to the same thing. You always get something new, right? And so I was riding along, mentoring a little bit, assistant teaching and learning. And of course, during the pandemic, TRE training went online. And so I got to ride through that transition. And help with that. And I know that it was a scary time. It was an uncertain time, and it was wonderful. I think it surprised all of us how well it went. And I know different people have different perspectives on that, but for me, having been a part of that, it was amazing how community can be created through the digital, tools.
No, I had the same. Wow, I can't believe how well this can work.
Yeah. And then doing TRE with people remotely and seeing what was possible that was really interesting for me. You kind of learn like, what is humaning, right? I was like, what is humaning? Wow. So, then it's October, TFA, TRE for all, we call it TFA, was going through some things, and I was very blissfully unaware. I tend to kind of just stay to my own little circle. I always think these 4 people, these 4 walls, this dog, these 2 cats, that's my business, stay in my business. And so I was minding my business, and Lynea said, would you? And immediately I did this. Because anytime anyone says, would you like to be on a board? It's a nonprofit work is very, 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 for me, it's been intentional and purposeful and intense. It's a lot of work. It's never just be on the board. So I laughed and I said, Lynea, I said, you have brought so many things into my life that have changed my life for the better that I will say yes. I said, if it was anyone but you, I would have said no, but I'm going to say yes. And so, and I felt it in my body too, Alex. I'm one of those people, I'm almost 50. Like, I know, like, feel it in your body first and then answer. Don't just say no or yes, right? Just feel it in your body first and then answer. And it felt like a yes. And I don't know that I, in my cortex, agreed with this yes.
It was about a yes.
We're going to try it again. So I knew that was a path I was going to go down. So I said yes. And there was a little interim board that had been assembled to just sort of ride through a transition.
The former executive director was leaving, and kind of a new era got ushered in.
The time of uncertainty. So I joined that crew, and we sat on the board. We saw, I mean, it was such an interesting thing because we didn't know, we were joining to help. It was so much listening to so many voices. And, we've talked about like, what is the scope of TFA? It's the certificating body, the nonprofit to increase access and decrease barriers to TRE around the globe. So it's
Well, let's pause for a second, because I think that might be a good thing for just context for listeners, is like let's just talk a little bit about TFA. Like, when did it begin? We don't need all the history, but just like the bullet points of TFA, how, what's its mission? So like, what would be your elevator description of what TRE for All is and its work in the world?
Yeah, I think that, so I want to, from what I know, from what I can tell, around 15 years
Yeah.
ago, right, Dr. Berceli started the nonprofit to just do that, to increase access to TRE around the globe,
Yep.
right, to make TRE available. And there was, I think Dr. Berceli was the director for a time. And then of course he travels all around. He always says he's taken TRE everywhere but Antarctica, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's made jokes about that. And I would go there too. We need someone to invite him to McMurdo.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, that was his work for a time. And then the director before me, of course, she went through, I think, how long was she there? 8 to 10 years?
Quite a while, not as a director all that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's a trainer community.
Yep.
I think we're up to 95 trainers now.
How many countries?
Oh, you know what? I haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay.
I haven't got to that part yet, but it's on my list. It's like how
Okay.
many countries,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it's many.
I mean, it's at least, I mean, it's 65 plus. That I'm
Yeah,
confident
yeah.
in 65 as a floor, but it's
Yep.
possible. I mean, I trained a few people in Iran this year. That might be a new
Yeah.
country. I think, there's a chance that we're pushing 70. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
It's
should
a
add it
beautiful
up.
thing. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful, I think it's on my, it's funny when you're a director, you start to kind of look at like all these silly things, like what metrics, because those are the things you need to know when
Yeah.
you're partnering with other organizations. Like
Yeah.
what do we do? What's the scope? What's the reach? What's the right, all those things. And so, yeah, that's one of the inventories we need to do is which, to really pin down which countries. And the other question is, we don't, we're not sure over the 15 years how many providers we have.
Right.
We're in the multiple thousands of providers.
Oh, yeah, easily. That would be a good
Yeah.
thing to know the minimum of. I mean, it's
Yes.
got to be at least 5,000.
That's a projected 5,000. Some people are in the maybe 8 to 10,000 range,
Yeah.
their best guess. But
Yeah.
I try not to pin the tail on the numbers because
Yeah. We don't know with total confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. But multiple thousands of providers. And so, as Dr. Berceli's goal was get TRE to as many people as possible,
Mhm.
right? To everybody.
Yeah.
And I think for a while there was a tagline of everybody and everybody, right? To make sure that the exercises are accessible for everybody. Because as we know, when you look at different bodies, right, the exercises, we can modify them, we can make them more accessible. We can just set 1 or 2 exercises aside if we need to. If anything causes pain or discomfort, right, skip it, go to the next one. So they're easily modifiable. And so just getting it out to, and making it, I don't like the word owned, but it's the one that's coming to mind. So I'm going to use it, owned by the people, right? So if you're in a community, right? How do you make it come to life for that community?
For them. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And how do you, depending on what the needs are, right? You could have, I can think of different, like I've done a lot of community outreach, right? And so in a day, groups I would go visit, you would need to modify it. So I think that it's such we always talk about, you've heard me say this before, the flexible skeleton of like the core of like, yes, there's a scope of practice. Yes, there are standards and there are guiding principles and TRE has a flexible skeleton. And I think that's one of the things sometimes we should talk about that at some point today because
yeah, we will.
I think we should get to that later, but it has a shape. TRE has a shape, right? And it can take further shape depending on the context. And that's the part I love about TRE too, is because it's innate to mammals, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I always like the comment, I've heard, when I introduced TRE and it's like something that I always like to share is, Dr. Berceli, he had all the credentials as a clinical social worker, he could have made this a clinical only modality exist, for where psychotherapists are the people learning it. But, I've heard him say a number of times, 80 to 90% of the global population doesn't have access to psychotherapy in the Western, sort of form of that. 80 to 90% do not have access to that. Okay. So could this, I think his vision, my understanding of his vision is, could this be something that transcends. I mean, it's used in psychotherapy. That's great. But if it was restricted there, how far can it reach? Could this be something that that finds its way into many more people's bodies than
Yeah.
that? And so that's always inspired
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and the first thing that comes to mind too, having, been in a field that was Western medicine modeled, right?
Mhm.
Medication, all of that, the the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, right? All of that structure, while very helpful and valid, does not pertain to the whole world, right? Like that, those are constructs that don't
Right.
don't have um cultural relevance in a
Yeah, they
lot of
don't have universal applicability at
yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But when you bring in, unfortunately, clinical language is pathologizing,
Mhm.
not in the intent always, but in the impact, yes, right? We have become a tertiary care illness treating medical system,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
There are many, many reasons that has happened over the years. Like I said, I was I'm old enough to have been part of medicine when we did paper charting, and when we did, preventative care before HMOs and all that, which is really, that's really funny to me, but it's true, right? And so I saw the changes that happened in the medical field,
Mm.
and, you know, I I could get really philosophical about all of that, but if we just stay focused on that, um, this is just something that is it's separate, right? It's separate from, and so
Mhm.
we can superimpose, we can put layers over it, we can shape it, we can add to it, we can construct it, we can lens it, we can framework it, but really it is a you could do it without language, right?
Right.
You can
Yeah. Well, when we get, I mean, maybe we're already into the topic we say we're going to talk about later, but like I was just in Honolulu, right? I was at the
yeah.
IVAT conference, which is the Institute for Violence, Abuse, uh, and Trauma. Okay, so it's going to be going on 26 years in Honolulu. Mostly social workers is the audience. It was kind of fun for me because I got to what I did is I really boned up on the research in a way that I haven't recently. So I got much clearer about kind of the last several years of research. But the thing that was sort of the heart of my presentation, which was an introduction to TRE and how it can be used in various settings, is I chose three case studies that to me felt like examples of where we can show, in a sense, the flexibility of how TRE can be used. And the three case studies, one was working with the firefighters in the New York City Fire Department zone, who over the last several years became interested in, and there what we talked about is how the deployment model was to as much as possible let them do a peer-led model where they could be the ones to deliver it. Okay, so that would one example. The other example was with this Catholic organization overseeing missions throughout Africa. Okay, so and bringing and how Muhammad Salah brought
Okay.
TRE into Cameroon to the Missionary Sisters of the Holy Rosary group, and in 11 days introduced TRE to something like 12 to 1,300 people in uh, clinics, colleges, staff, hospitals, the sisters, the missionary sisters themselves. So that was kind of what the second case study, and then the third one was a new one for me, which was an ongoing one, which is this. There's a provider, TRE provider, Ryan Bemis. He's in New Mexico, and he has been part of a project in Guatemala working with Mayan villages, Mayan speaking villages who that whole their area was went through a genocide in the 1990s, and the way they've constructed their project, that genocide has been largely unacknowledged. And then they also have gone through what they call an epistemicide, which was a new word for me, which basically means that their means of understand their indigenous medical model of healers, the plants that they grow, and their healing systems, all of that was intentionally disrupted by the state as a way to as part of kind of the genocidal intent of these things. Well, so in any case, Ryan, the provider I referred to, has several times now. Uh, he's part of a team of people that do a community healthcare program that actually connect to acupuncture. He's an acupuncturist, and there's this whole other component. But he now recently started bringing in TRE in the last several visits. And what I really highlighted in this model, coming to something you're saying right now, is there were several examples of where, yeah, they have translators. You know, many of these people are speaking. I mean, it's Spanish, yes, but their Mayan language. But there were times when the translators weren't available. Well, did that stop them? No, they still continued
Yes.
to deliver. So this idea that of course, there's lots of times things that we want to share verbally, but it's also something we can teach human to human, and words can diminish in there. You know, it's not always as important. And then to me, the most wonderful thing about their whole project is that after everything was said and done, they spent a lot of time asking the indigenous healers, because some of them are still there, how they understand and conceptualize tremoring and acupuncture, because they're working with both modalities. But how does it fit within their own traditional worldview, Mayan worldview, and the people and they did 20 ethnographic interviews, because part of the scope of their project is sort of this cross-cultural piece. And again, in the spirit of so to me, I especially honed in on that last example in my talk, because to me it was such a useful example of here. um, Tremoring has existed in lots of forms. TR Dr. Berceli always said he didn't invent this. He just found one. He saw it in his own scope and then developed his own methods. And then, of course, we learned that it has popped up it's probably existed in one form or another in all indigenous kind of contexts.
Yeah.
So in any case, like this idea, so you're talking about there's a core of it, but then there's this adaptability, and that just sort of that's what I was trying to convey in this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, that's beautiful. When you talk about, I have friends from many different indigenous just regions, and yeah, being present while that recovery and healing is happening is, I think it's one of the most important places to learn, right? Because there are, and Terry, I've talked to you before about how I think, and I think today when we were getting ready, you know, I had a crazy day and I was like, what do I really want to talk about? I think that when we talk about that example, right, of people who've experienced genocide and this epistemide,
yeah,
and I have friends who are trying to reclaim bits of language that was lost. And,
yeah.
I have learned so much from those friends that has, you know, uh, I have so much knowledge crammed in here and so much research, like I said. And when I set all of that aside and I think about what I've learned from my Indigenous friends, my Native American friends, right? People from all different cultures, the way that we are with each other, right? When we set aside words, knowledge, ideas, hierarchies, right? All of that.
Mm,
The fact that we can find something like it's what Dr. Berceli said, right? That is innate to all humans, regardless of culture,
mm,
right? Regardless of language, regardless of gender, all the categories, how we try to structure things up. If we take all those aside,
mm,
it's something that all of us are able to do, right? To just whew,
mm.
like when the kids were little, I wasn't trying to teach my little kids to take a breath. I was like, take a foo, and they'd go foo.
Ooh.
So we can all take a foo, right? We can all just take a foo. But that is such a beautiful And I don't know what words to use, but it feels like a very rare privilege that not a lot of us get to be in those type of settings. And so when you are able to be in a setting where reclaiming of lost practices is happening and you get to listen, it, I think I've talked to you. What I was going to say is then we have this loud, fast moving, noisy influencer world. And I do not want to talk bad about influencers because we set all the judgment aside.
You're talking about sort of like Instagram wellness space. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, all of it. Because I think I was using the word earlier, like intersection of healthcare and wellness and, healing and the appropriation and misappropriation, right, of indigenous and cultural practices. That's just, there's so much going on. And because people have this vigor and this, I want to say like almost desperation to like feel better, to heal, right? Which is like what I said, I want to bring in feeling better and spread that to us. Any moments we can find joy or warmth or delight, right? Like any moment.
Good stuff when that can be shared.
Yeah. So then we come around to this almost like frantic point in time where so much is going on that is so difficult, right? And dare I say, there are some really bad things happening right now, right? Very, very, very challenging and scary. It's a scary time, right? So then we're bringing in these gentle measures that I think have somewhat been like I think about TRE specifically and with TRE for all, our mission being to clarify, to increase accessibility, to decrease barriers, to make sure this is safe and scaffolded and not overly rigid and just able to go where it needs to go and be where it needs to be, right? There is one experience, which is being in a setting, right, where this intense healing is happening and people from different cultures can do it without talking. And the I don't know what percentage of language or of communication is nonverbal, right?
Yeah, right. A lot.
A lot of it, like most of it, right?
Right. 80%.
So we're there. Yeah, exactly. So we're there doing that work together. Or we're over here using every term we can to get, like to lend credibility, right? Or to fit that evidence-based
put things into boxes and diagnoses and pathologies.
Right. So TRE is no good and here's why. TRE is amazing and here's why, right? This method is no good. Let me tell you why, And so I think it's this teaching, selling, promoting model that in itself isn't bad or good, it just is. But those two experiences really kind of show you like where TRE can go, right? Into these very gentle places, into these very humble places, into these very reverent places, right? And then there are people, like we know, like some of the, well, you talked about Muhammad doing his work with the music playing and bringing joy and laughter into it, because that's one of the reasons Lynea and I she would have me come to workshops because I laugh during TRE. I start giggling, I get the giggles, and it's that diaphragm release where it's like giggling and and I'm like, oh, here it comes. Oh no, this is going to be a laughing day, right? And so it makes it less scary. So you're bringing, right? Look at the breadth of the experiences, right? Like we can play Taylor Swift with teenagers and teach them to do it on the wall and just, we don't have to lay on the floor. We can, you can modify it for the setting. And I think that's what I love about it is it can be what it needs to be because it's innate to each body, to each place, to each setting. So I don't know. There's something in there I can't quite articulate, but just walking through it with you, just the visuals that I get, the different experiences, right? It's flexible.
Well, okay. So this leads me to a curiosity that I have, or I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's like, what, I guess I would formulate the question this way. It's like, In what ways are we already doing an awesome job? It's like, okay, we've got research that shows the TRE. We have a randomized controlled trial that shows the TRE is helpful for multiple sclerosis. That's an achievement.
Yeah.
We've got firefighters in the United States using TRE with their probationer. That's an achievement, or that's a success. I going back to the early 2000s, it's like, I think of Dr. Berceli as kind of a Pied Piper who just popped
Yeah.
up, was in Brazil and South Africa,
Yeah.
and so the number of countries, Faroe Islands, I was excited once to be on a call where the group I had never heard of the Faroe Islands, and there were a bunch of providers there. I was like, wow. So that's another success. I mean, so these nuns are now using it, right? So, and these are just the examples I know of. There's many, many, many others than that. So there's a lot of successes. So I'm curious for you. It's like if we look ahead for 10 years, it's
Mhm.
like, well, what have we already done a really good job at? And like, what do you hope, what do you hope is true in 10 years that's not true today yet?
Oh, that's a big question. Okay. If we think about what we're already doing well,
Yeah.
we have, and I think about the organization itself, the nonprofit is very, very small. It's just
Mhm.
myself, our two contractors, right? We have student intern,
Yeah.
um, and just trying to like handle the flow of communication, keep up with that. I think I have like 900 emails right now, Alex.
Wow.
It's usually, and then I can get them down, and then it's so much volume of,
Yeah.
I would just call it the mundane everyday of a nonprofit, right? Little tricky things like the trademark, or the how do we hold the intellectual property well? How do we, people who want to try to bring it to a new area, right? So if I have 900 emails, right,
Mhm.
that's a sign that we are, there's a curiosity about TRE.
Yeah.
There is a volume of interest and communication and
There's a
flow.
critical mass of action.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah, and so and that makes sense because, again, it's an innate organic, method, so wonderful, right? And accessible, accessible, accessible. Um So we're getting the message out there. And when I say we, separate from just the little nonprofit skeleton crew that we have, the trainers and the providers, right? The work is happening. And we have a lot of, like, a big online presence. We have lots of online, we're doing that, like, here's the YouTube, here's Dr. Berceli's YouTube, here's the Instagram and the Facebook and those things, these little like digital vessels, but also the word of mouth, right? Just the word of mouth. And so TRE is out there. I think we're doing that well, clearly. I think people often ponder that could be better. Things could always be better. Things could always be worse, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's out there. We have,
There's two specific. Let me.
yeah. Go ahead.
You might have more to answer, but I'm just going to jump ahead. There's two groups that I wonder about. I haven't worked with these groups myself much. One of them you alluded to, which is children, and I know there's Lynea as an example. There's other
Mhm.
things afoot. Um,
Yeah, we
so
have
that's
Vera. Vera's been working with children. She wrote the graphic novel, I think,
Yeah,
for
a book just
introducing
came out,
Tremoring.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Spella and Katya in
Yeah,
Slovenia
yep,
did a pilot project.
yep.
So like that's its own. And then there's another, but then the other end of the spectrum, like I sometimes think about like in elder care environments.
Yeah.
That's like I think that a lot could be happening. So like those are two groups that I wonder if there's more. Um, we are starting to see it more, like the first responder community that seems to be waking up.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think I sometimes think that military could be more. So I had this big aha coming out of this IVAT conference a few weeks ago. My big aha was it's hard to describe this. On the one hand, I by doing this deep dive into the research, I on the one hand I realized we're more solid in our
Yeah.
small research base than I feared. Like it's sort of like the few studies especially some of the more recent ones are actually of quite a good standard.
Yeah.
So we're better than I feared in terms
Yep.
of kind of a solid evidence base. but we're not nearly as matured as we need to be. So like that's a little bit, that was a big take home for me. And I talked to Steve, my colleague in Norway. I said, Steve, like, you and I are not academics, we're not researchers, but we need to be part of this conversation. We need to see if we can partner with people who are academically affiliated. If there's anything we can do to kind of keep the momentum, because when I think about really big applications, like I was thinking about military, because there are a lot of military at this conference.
Yeah.
And I talked to Dr. Berceli after. He said, Alex, I've done so many military things throughout the years. He sent me like a list of all the ones he had done, which was like 40 different presentations. And he said, but I was always invited in through the back door, never the front door. It was always a word of mouth thing. And if we ever start getting invited into the front door, it's going to be because of the maturing of the evidence base. So that's like so like when I think about a 10-year thing, it's like, okay, could we get some research more? I mean, I'm like really proud of the research we do have.
Yeah, definitely.
But could be 10x or 100x that.
Real.
But so these are some of my own thoughts. But yeah, I want to know more about
yeah. It's been fun. So of course we have the research out of China now, right? Some of the reports just came out early this year. And that's, without going into it too deeply, and people can look on the YouTube channel, the TRE for All YouTube, and David Berceli has, or actually, I think those are on Dr. Berceli's YouTube channel.
Probably, or just going straight to the treglobal.org/research. I mean,
that's right.
It's all, yeah.
Yep. And so looking at the work with people who are, if I remember right, in the hospital for with mood disorder, right? And how does TRE affect? The other one is dyads, parents, and
that one, that's a randomized controlled trial that they haven't published the results yet. But exactly, teen parent dyads. That'll be a really interesting one.
Yeah. Having the parents tremor. Having children,
kids.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, that's an audacious claim, but I'm gonna say it anyway. There's not much that's more stressful than watching your child suffer. Yeah. So I think that, if it alleviates stress in the parent, right, that's good for the kids. I think that's amazing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of and research creates opportunities for more questions, right? Findings that the researchers really do a good job of like, but what about if we turn it this way? And what if we look at it this way? So I think you're right that once that ball gets rolling, it's rolling. And so that's going to keep going. We have the research in Denmark, like you said, out of Denmark and other places about multiple sclerosis. And, the other thing too, like, yes, with children are such a precious population, right? Because we know studying with kids, that's a whole different level. And so just normalizing it for children, what Dr. Berceli has really pushed is just normalizing it for kids. This is normal. This is something you can do because kids don't have the years and years and years of defense mechanisms like we do, right? Speaking for myself, I mean, I'm almost 50, right? I have 5 decades of defense mechanisms. I had to really chip away at my defense mechanisms to be able to tremor effectively. And of course, as a TRE provider, right, you're helping other people bring their tremor along, and then you're like, have this like, can't let go all the way. Got to get myself there, right? And like when I can get into a good tremor, then I know I'm not being a hypocrite and I'm doing my work, right? Sure. So it's such a dynamic process. And so you talk about bringing it into schools. Schools are very productive, right? But there has been TRE in some schools. There, hospital settings. I mean, there's so many places, but really also just bringing youth into, right, like student interns. I was like, bring students in, right? Bring college kids in, bring youth ambassadors, like try this out. I think just strewing it about as something that's available, and kids they'll look at it. If they're curious, they'll do it. If they're not, they will not. And you can't, it's like, let them have the autonomous,
they can choose.
Because, and even if you just, like I think about all the things that I could show my kids, here's 14 things you can do to feel better. Well, maybe they're 27 before they decide they're going to use one of those, but they've seen it before.
They've seen it, right?
Yeah, they've seen me tremor. They've seen the dog lay down next to me while I tremor, so you're normalizing it. Like a big piece of it with kids is normalizing it
Mhm.
and then introducing it, into settings when
Well,
you're
then, or say, let's say, I don't know, your kids or somebody's, let's say they see it, but they, whatever,
yeah,
they're not taking it in.
yeah,
But like, okay, the first time they're in a minor fender bender and
yeah.
their body shakes, or they're with
Mhm,
somebody who goes through a crisis and they're seeing
mhm,
the
mhm.
phenomenon in the wild in
Yeah,
action. Well, they're going to know what it is. They're going to have some
yeah,
references towards it.
exactly.
That alone is a big
That alone. Yeah.
benefit in my view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Just, what I find too, I told Dr. Berceli a story once where I almost got hit by a car. In my car. I was just at a stoplight and a car goes like within a couple feet of my car hits, and I just got out and the man was a little shocked.
Shaky.
And
Oh,
he
shocked.
started
Yeah.
to shock a little. He started to shake a little. And I just said, "Oh, yeah, good. Your body's trying to take care of that. You can shake that off." And he just did a very vigorous shake. And then he was like, "Oh," but it was interesting, like
Yeah.
just giving permission
Amazing.
from another person outside of you to be like, "Oh, good. You can shake it off." And then I didn't say a word about TRE or tremoring. I just said, "Okay, here's my number. If you need a witness, I got to get through this light before they close it because I got to
Mhm.
pick my kid up from school." And I zoomed away.
Yeah.
So just even stuff like that. So yeah, for kids, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
You talk about the military, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that, military bearing is a part of the job. You
Mhm.
learn to lock it up,
Yeah.
right? The kids
Yeah.
say lock in now. Well, the military, you're like lock in.
Well, yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, we could lock out a little. We could lock out a little. Like, so I think you're right there. And then the one thing I'm thinking of right now that's very pertinent is because of all of the global tensions and things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
The geopolitical issues that are going on, without getting too deeply into that in the time we have left,
Mhm.
there is a massive increase and spike in legitimate, right? Like war trauma. And,
Yeah.
that's where Dr. Berceli founded this
Began.
method, right?
Right.
Was in those settings.
Yeah.
So we look at like the clinical aspects and the research, and we look at the military, and we look at the kids, and then we look at that what's going on globally right now is where this came from. And so we have, at TRE for All, one of the things that we look at is, if we look at like, using corporate words like pillars, we have the pillar that is making sure that there is a scope and ethics and conduct guidelines
Mhm.
for this method
Yeah.
because it is so versatile, right? Like what is it? What is it? Where is it? What is it not?
Mhm.
Why is it bad? Why is it good? All that. So our clarity, we have our clarity pillar
Yeah.
and our conduct pillar. And then we have our right, the increasing accessibility. And some of that is trying to get into partnerships where we can. There are a lot of TRE trainers and providers who are very, very, very embedded in humanitarian work, right? Disaster relief, going into places. I've heard a couple different trainers use the words the places no one likes to go, right? Going into the places no one likes to go. And I've talked about some of the
Yeah.
projects that are going on out there.
Yeah.
And so being able to, some of these TRE trainers are doing that work pro bono. You've done a ton of pro bono work to just try to help people get through increased accessibility. I think that if we can partner with some adjacent or, mission aligned kind of
Mhm.
organizations, right? Like we're all going to have to respond to what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to respond together
Yeah.
because what is happening is big. And so I think about all of these subcultures where, people can benefit and just the massive trauma that's happening, and I could go into many examples, but we're all watching the news right now,
Yeah.
and so I think that if we can make it available to the people who could benefit from it, and we talk about like in the moment of the acute trauma isn't necessarily the time to say, here's a new method,
Right. Right.
because there is a lot of shock and there is a lot of displacement and there's a lot of loss right now, a lot of grief.
Yeah.
But, letting people know it's out there,
Mhm.
right? And that there are people who will bring it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where when people say to me, like, what's the role of TRE? I'm like, wherever there is um, a larger need, I don't know what words to use, but larger need for response than a few therapists can go and do, right? Because that therapy model, you've probably heard the stories, doesn't always work when you go to respond to massive places where there have been casualties, things like genocide. Therapy is a wonderful tool. I have thrived because of my counselors over the years. Like that's one part of my team. But I think about, there are not enough therapists to meet the need that is going to be emerging here soon. And so novel, I don't even want to say novel because TRE has been around a long time, but body-based and simple methods like TRE, I think there's just going to be a natural evolution, right? And so this has been a nice time for TRE for all to get things a little more structured, not overly structured, create more, pathways and meet some of the capacity. It's just been really interesting to see it grow on its own, right? So I think about the programs you've talked about with the firefighters, right? The fire departments, more kids getting exposed to it, right? It's just sort of evolving on its own. Despite what, it's funny when you said the research, you're like, oh, I was surprised. I'm like, the influencers got to you too. They're like, no,
no, the academics got to me. That's
the academics got to you. So I think there is, it's just an evolving body of work, just like any other body of work. It's not, no one's perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's something that's been here a long time and is very, accessible. Accessible, right?
Okay. Closing topic or question. How does Tremoring, I mean, you've alluded to this, but how's Tremoring supporting you now in your role? You've got a big job, as this organizational lead. But tell us what you're.
Alex, I'm gonna be honest, like having the ability to tremor, I couldn't shut my tremoring down if I tried now. It just very organically comes in, and I'll say to people, I am tremoring right now, right? I'm tremoring right now, right? And it moves through, and this is so interesting. I'm at risk of using, like, I'm a writer, so get really wordy with things, but in this really elegant way. Like I think I've even messaged you after some, like, whoa, I just had a vigorous tremor, right? Like a vigorous, but it's like one leg just let the steam off, or I think about times when I've been presenting and maybe there is, I love working with skeptics because skeptics keep us honest, right? As long as they don't blockade.
Yeah, if it's in good faith. Sure.
Good faith skepticism.
Right.
Amazing. And so if there's a skeptic in the room that's maybe not aligning with the rest of the room or whatever, and so you get a little nervous, maybe nervous isn't the right word, you get a little curious, right? You get these activations around, like, what am I going to do now? I can just tremor, and it puts all that noise aside. Right. I've talked with you about some of the things I'm going through in my life, right? Being a parent to two teenagers, one that's getting ready to go to college, being married for 24 years, right? Like, in a relationship for 24 years, like the tremor, it just helps me. And I think David said this in one of his last letters to us, decreases the physiological noise. What I can just be. And this is a hard job. You look at being personally responsible for 900 emails. My kids are like, what? That's horrible. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty horrible. Or I'll have like 100 unanswered texts, and I just look at it and I'm like, all right, we can do a couple at a time. It just helps me stay in reality rather than sucked away into this disreality where it's like, I can't answer 108 texts or 900 messages, but I can do a few at a time and I can ask for help. Right. And just staying steady and remembering to do my self-care, right? Because otherwise these structures they tighten us up, they protect us, and then we're in a turtle shell and we're like, oh yeah, I forgot that I can, reach out. It's also made me braver, I'm gonna be honest, because, like, you remember when I met you, right? I called you and I said, hey, Alex. Can I tell that story? Do you think that's...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you hear in a global community where we never get to meet each other. Right. You hear myths, you hear legends, you hear stories, and I have consistently in my life learned that if something is shared with me about someone, the best thing I could do is call that person and say, hey, I heard this thing about you. What, tell me all about it. And
Right.
so I called you, right? It makes it no big deal to call someone and say, not so-and-so said, because I don't want, create turmoil, turbulence, but to just be human to human. Say, tell me more, tell me about this. I'm curious, and just, it dissipates a lot of not just the physiological noise inside of me, the stress that is innate to having such a big, responsibility and tasked with such an interesting role. It creates
So wait, but let me
social
ask you
ones.
directly. So
Yeah.
like, because you're saying, it's helped to bravery. And so it sounds
Mhm.
like I mean, your job intrinsically is, because of so many people and blah, 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 blah. Lots of, there's, part of your job is to engage with conflict. We're a
Yeah.
global community.
Yes.
Conflict is there.
Yeah.
But so it's sounding to me like maybe tremoring, like you're more able to just sort of step into or
Yeah.
face conflict. Is a more
Yeah.
readily? Is that
Okay.
fair to say?
This is such a good ending point because I don't know if I've told you this before, but I have, you learn these little things about yourself and they become your sound bites, right?
Yeah.
One of my sound bites is that conflict is hard. I have met a lot of people who describe themselves as conflict avoidant because it
Sure.
is difficult,
Right.
right?
Right.
For me, conflict has always been a piece of loving well.
Okay.
Because if I I have a big heart. I have thick skin most of the time, but I have a very soft, very big heart.
Okay.
And to see as a person who is highly empathetic, who cares very much, who is a natural born nurturer, who has been in the caring fields, the medicine fields for a couple decades plus,
Mhm.
and now has landed here, right? If I can't step into conflict wisely, thoughtfully, with care, with
Mhm.
intention, and say, find the yes and find the no's, find the
Mhm.
yeses and find the no's. And really, I think we've talked about this before, any kind of governance that has to happen at TRE for all. I was in the military, right? Unless you have gone so far over that there's, we can't, like if you've broken laws, you've broken laws, right?
Right.
If you are struggling or there's something going on that requires director type behavior,
Mhm.
it's just opportunities to grow and learn, right?
Yeah.
So governance really is, so like people talk about discipline, with your parent,
Yeah.
right? Discipline is becoming disciplined, becoming, more in integrity, more in congruence with your values, more clear, more of everything you want to be, right? And it's really hard to be human. So I think that
Mm.
um, what I found is that, yeah, dairy, the tremor, right? The tremor mechanism, the way I've been able to integrate the number of tools I've used, has all come together to allow me to, yes, step into those tense or conflicted places, and try to make the best decisions that I am able to. And you know, to be wrong sometimes, to say, I am happy to acknowledge when I'm wrong, right? So it's also given me that security.
That flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility,
Yeah.
security, like we're all learning together, right? I
Yeah.
don't know more or less necessarily than any person that I'm sitting across from,
Yeah.
but to be able to do what I'm tasked with doing, right? Which is directing, I guess, which really
Sure.
is this giant collaborative way with so
Right.
many people,
Yeah.
to just move with as much wisdom and, humor and grace as I can. And yeah, conflict is important to be able to navigate. And I talk about dynamic tension, the muscles push
Right.
against each other to
Right.
move.
Yeah.
Conflict is a dynamic tension that can move us forward, but if we ignore it, right, that it creates some problems, and sometimes you got to ignore it. Sometimes you don't. So yeah, I think that's a good point that you raise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's certainly what I mean in the, whatever it's been, 3, 5 months, however long I have been
Yeah.
connecting with you, and and some of it's in and around whatever, just at least it's adjacent to how TFA is developing. And
Yeah.
that has just really come across to me as you're a person who's, you've come into in a leadership role in a time of transition. And so you're part of you, and not only you, but with the board and everybody. It's a period of trying to create clarity after a period where there was less clarity.
Yeah.
But something that I have just observed is that you, on the one hand, there's times that they're tough aspects of your job,
Yeah.
and like you seem to have a strong value, but like not just being a tough leader, you're trying to be you are a human leader. And what I suspect is that because you stay connected to your body, you stay connected to your nervous system, you tremor and you bring in all these other tools. It feels to me like that's how you do that. That's how you
Yeah.
handle the vicissitudes of the heavier part of your work, but with presence and care and a big heart and tough skin when you need it and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels true. It
Yeah.
feels true. Yeah, it's funny to think that I have ended up here. People ask me like, "What's your job?" And I'm like, "Hold on, it's very complicated to explain." And also, I never intended to be here, and I am shocked. I'm as shocked as anyone else that I'm here, right? Like, I had no intention. I literally thought I was going to just go to the library and kind of, I still go to the library and do the story times and stuff. I kept that job because I love it, but I had no intention of landing in a position or a role like this. And it's been so interesting to see that, I think sometimes this is like, we could get really into philosophy about it, but what is your purpose, right? And you think about all the things that I've gone through, the different experiences that I've had, the intensity. Betsy, the board president, and I will often look at each other because Betsy's retired first responder, right? And is a TRE trainer now in North Carolina. And so Betsy and I look at each other and be like, okay, the stuff she has seen and the stuff I have seen, right? This is not any of that. Like,
Yeah,
we can
this isn't
just
bad.
slow down and really think it through, because sometimes, the intensity will peak and it's like, okay, wait, hold on. There's no blood. So everyone's breathing. Okay,
Yeah.
we're okay, and then hopefully it stays that way. But it's not anywhere I ever intended to be,
Yeah.
but here I am. And
You
so
are.
to be able to have that perspective too of like, the experiences I've gone through in the past are, they're very valuable in keeping perspective in this role.
Yeah.
And we have a duty
Cool.
to the public to really describe what TRE is and what it's not, to make it more accessible to as many people that want it. And yeah, I'm here for that. I'm here for that. I love this method, and I'm falling in love with the community,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Cool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Tanya, thank you. I mean, thank you so much for just the, kind of a deep dive of just kind of both where you've been professionally and how that just feeds into how you're working in this field. And just, thank you for your service. I mean, now you're in a paid role, but based on when I see messages coming in, I have the hunch you're working far above and beyond your allocated hours, and certainly during your interim board period. So, just just how you've stepped into this has been impressive for me to see, and I appreciate it as somebody in the TRE world. Appreciate your service with it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I get a lot of really sweet feedback. And I tell people that every affirmation counts, and every kind email I've gotten it's just wind in the sails, and I'm old enough to know better than to try to be a martyr.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's just no, like, this is important work. It requires patience and diligence and groundedness, and the community is very affirming. And so, we're getting there, I think, one step at a time. And yeah, I don't
Cool.
know. It's a
Oh,
good place
very
to be.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is this a place we can land?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. We hope you found inspiration and new insights into the power of neurogenic tremoring.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It really helps us reach more people interested in this transformative work.
And if you want to dive deeper, connect with us. Or to learn more about our sessions, courses, and upcoming trainings, head over to neurogenicintegration.com.